Okay guys, welcome back to another video. So what we're going to be doing today is unpacking, how to train your clients better, how to get better technique out of them, understand what to look for, in a nutshell, understand and apply the rules of good technique. Firstly, we need to understand what good technique is. Then we need to unpack like what involves, assessing technique of someone, and then looking at things like reference lines and all of those kind of things. When it comes to personal training, this should be one of the areas that we're masters of our craft. Like when we look at like the main scope of practice for a personal trainer, it's heavily exercise intensive. We want to be able to demonstrate exercise. We want to be able to assess movement and make sure someone's doing something properly, which is what we're talking about today. And then also we want to be like a good motivator and obviously really good at programming too. Now, when it comes to the definition of technique, we like to define it as executing a movement through a predetermined range of motion with adherence to reference lines decided upon an individual's morphology in accordance with the target outcome. So when we think about it like that, it's like that's going to be very broad, so we need to unpack all of those different parts within that definition so we understand how to apply the technique to all of these individual clients that you have that are put together differently, that have different goals, they have different capabilities, limitations, injuries, those kind of things, so that you can be that coach that teaches and coaches people individually to their own needs and desires, and just how they're built as well. So moving on to executing movements through a predetermined range of motion. So range of motion is obviously the capabilities of your joints and your muscles lengthening and shortening. So your joints moving and your muscles lengthening and shortening to their capabilities and obviously the target outcome of the exercise, whether it's strength, hypertrophy, whatever it is. It's like your muscles and joints have a capability to move and lengthen and shorten. A movement's supposed to look a certain way and it's supposed to go from point A to point B. Now, we can't really standardize every single exercise that way because the reason why we have individual ranges of motion is because, people have different skill sets. People have different, capabilities in terms of like joint structure and those kind of things. Some people might be injured. We might have a target outcome that we only want to work a particular muscle within a range of motion, because if we move outside of that range of motion and it might be bigger, we actually might be working other muscle groups or something like that are a little bit undesirable. So we need to understand the client, the specificity of it relating to the goal, and then the proficiency in what they're capable of. Like, if a client can't squat ass to grass, for example, like there's no point getting them to do that. It's like standardizing the range of motion maybe onto like a box or, just a like horizontal hip and knee for now. That might be enough for and service the goal at that given point, and then we might progress them on later. So we need to understand this stuff when we're deciding a range of motion for a client, and it's going to and acknowledge that it's going to differ from person to person. Now we'd move to the adherence of reference lines. So reference lines are used to kind of observe the body through movement. So we've got all of these like axes points and I guess like a checklist where we can kind of sit with somebody within a movement at the top, mid-range, at the bottom, and go, right, well, this is supposed to be in alignment with this, this is supposed to be in alignment with that, that's supposed to be in alignment with that. And we can actually do that on the side and on the back. So if you're actually one of those coaches who's engaged with your clients and you're assessing their movement within space and time, you're going to assess it from the side, you're going to be able to assess it from the back, and we can actually start to observe like breakdowns, because if one point's not kind of where it needs to be, like over another point, and the alignment is kind of out, we can start to build a bit of a profile here. It might be something that we can cue. So you might be saying like, hey, do this. It might be, kind of drive the feet into the floor, drive the knees outwards a tiny bit, and you might fix that kind of knee over foot kind of alignment when we're doing something like a squat. And if it's like can't be fixed from a cueing perspective, then we might need to investigate further. And that's when we can start to do, maybe some testing through movement again, maybe some isolated testing on a particular joint, for example, and then we can start to integrate some intervention, maybe some stretching, some foam rolling, some mobility work, maybe some direct intervention, direct strengthening work and something like that. Assess if it's improving, and then go, okay, well, if it's improved, let's keep continuing on with that strategy. If it hasn't, it might be an opportunity to start to refer out to someone like an allied health professional or a specialist that might be able to get a little bit more range and kind of get those reference lines and that person moving in alignment with where, in the way that they should be. So understanding these reference points and being able to look at someone, I guess, in 2D and almost 3D space when we're looking at the sides and the backs and the front and all of the angles, allows us to get a better idea of what that movement should look like. Then we move on to understanding someone's individual morphology. So we've talked about it already. We mentioned it before, but it's like every single person is put together differently. So their joint structures are slightly different. Their bone lengths are slightly different as well. So that's going to really influence the way somebody moves. So, how someone squats, for example, is going to differ tremendously because everyone's got different depths of their hip sockets. They've got different lengths of their femur and their tibia and fibula, for example. They've also got, different torso lengths as well. So some people are going to be able to squat ass to grass. Some people are going to need to squat wide. Some people are going to be able to squat narrow. Some people, their toes are going to be pointed slightly more inward. Some people, their toes are going to be slightly outward. So we can't standardize a squat technique if we know this stuff, because we're going to potentially put someone in a really awkward position where it's like trying to push a square peg in a round hole, trying to get them to squat in a position with load, maybe on their back or in the front or whatever it is. And they don't fit that profile because they don't move that way. So we have to make sure that we understand this, be able to go, okay, so for your particular kind of structure, we're probably best to squat like this, go through the progression and regression model to make sure that we do that, and then be able to standardize the technique for them. It's like, okay, well, if we only break knee and hip parallel for this particular client for whatever reason, then we're standardizing that range of motion, and that's part of the technique for that particular individual. If this person can go ass to grass and they have the ability to do that safely, and they're in a controlled fashion and all the reference lines are in alignment, that's fine. We've standardized the technique for that person, and that's their technique, which is going to differ to the example before. So making sure we understand and accept and acknowledge that individual variances in terms of structure are actually a huge influence in assessing technique for people. And then the last part's considering the target outcome. So it's like we mentioned this before. It's like, why are you doing this particular exercise, and what impact is it going to have when you perform it in a specific way? Like, let's talk about using a lunge, for example. We can manipulate that lunge at all different angles of like the knee, the ankle, and the hip to target specific musculature for whatever reason. We can make it more glute dominant. We can make it more quad dominant. We can use it to get more range of motion and mobility in the ankles to warm up for a squat, for example. So we have to understand, what is the goal? What are we trying to use this particular exercise for? And it's like, that's part of standardizing that technique. Because if we just go, well, a lunge is 90 degrees at the hip, 90 degrees at the ankle, or 90 degrees at the knee, or whatever it is, it's like, then every single lunge should be like that. But it's like, what if this particular person needs lots of knee drives to get a little bit more range of motion in those ankles, so to prepare them for like a squat, for example? What if this person wants lots of knee flexion with the knee driving over the toes to make it a little bit more quad dominant? What if this person wants an upright torso for that particular reason too? What if this person's trying to, get more flexion at the hip to stretch those glutes out and kind of lengthen them and make sure that we're working like that mid to lengthened range of the glutes in that particular exercise? Like, we have to understand those things because they're going to, change and alter our perception of what this technique is for this particular individual. So by now you'd have a great understanding of the inner workings of the technique for somebody. Now that it's goal specific, that's going to alter our perception of how we perceive the exercise and how we assess it. We know that it's individually specific as well because we all move in different ways. We understand that people have different capabilities in their joints and muscles may be lengthened and shortened in specific ways. So assessing the technique, is going to be altered because of that too. And then we also understand how to assess in, 2D and potentially 3D space by looking at these reference lines and, just seeing if something doesn't add up. Maybe there's a cue that we can use to fix it, or maybe there's some specific intervention that might improve that reference line kind of lining up again, or having the ability to refer out and get somebody who is a little bit more of a specialist in that area and that's their main scope of practice to be able to help your clients move better, which is going to get them better results in the gym. If you want to know a little bit more information about assessing range of motion, assessing the technique, reference lines, those kinds of things, we've actually got some really good publications on our website at www.stcfitlearning.com. There's some really good graphics, takes you on a really good step-by-step process of like things to look for. And we use the squat for an example of like what reference lines to do and where to start and like how to determine, if your clients are moving well, and maybe some cues and stuff on like how to fix them. So you can just find that all on the website. If you're an Audible learner as well and you're into podcasting, make sure that you jump onto your favorite podcasting platform and listen to the STC Fit Learning podcast. We've got heaps of episodes about training, business, and all of those other things to make you a good coach and a good business owner. Okay, guys, that's it for us on this particular video. Hope to see you guys in the next one. If you got any feedback on this video, drop it in the comments. If you got any suggestions on what you would like to see, also make your way there. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel with notifications on so you don't miss out on any of the new videos that will be released shortly.